Mark was there, and I said to him, I said, well, what was my run time? And then he told me like 3:33 or something. And I was like, what? I literally looked at him, I said, what? And I started crying. 3:33, what? And I said, what was my time? And when he told me it was like 9:47 or something, I couldn't, I was like, what? It was such a surreal feeling. I couldn't wrap my head around, like, oh my gosh, everything came together for me today. So it was like just a surreal moment, where all the training and all that time and like it paid off. It happened for me that day.
That is Ginny Cataldi this week on the Do It For Yourself podcast. Hey everybody, how's it going? Boy, have I got some great news for you. If you don't know it already, this week I have Ginny Cataldi back again for a follow-up episode after an amazing season that she is just finishing up. And we get a chance to go through all of her races from this season and kind of talk about some of the things that she was doing. We get a chance to talk about some of the things and changes that she made in order to stay healthy this season and kind of prevent some injuries, and how she changed up her warm-up and technique for the swim to kind of overcome some of the anxieties that she was experiencing when she was getting into the swim, and some of the anxieties that she actually experienced early on in this season, some of the changes that she made in order to overcome that in her later races for this season. So it was really cool to get a chance to catch up about the season, and we also get to dive into what Ginny is up to now. And I don't want to give too much away, but I'm sure if you follow her on Instagram and that's how you found the podcast, you probably have a little bit of an idea as to what I'm talking about. But Ginny is actually battling with some injuries right now, and it's some injuries that are way more serious than she realized at the very beginning. And so that's kind of what she's dealing with right now. And at the very end, we get a chance to kind of reach out and take some questions from the listeners and the followers of Instagram that we've gotten a chance to talk with and bring into the show. So I want to thank you guys so much for coming on and checking us out. And here is my follow-up with Ginny Cataldi. Spoiler alert, that's what we're planning.
That's so cool. I love it.
So,
but it should be that way. I like it.
Yeah, and I mean, I did Triathlon Terrence podcast, and I was open on his show, but I feel like they're gonna ask, because they know me personally, so they're gonna ask really whatever they want. But it could get interesting. it could get really, really interesting.
You'll be like, insert monkey covering eyes here.
Yeah. Or the one where he's covering his mouth.
Yeah.
or his ears. Yeah. So, well, you're back again, Ginny.
Yes.
And I'm really excited. I'm excited for two reasons. One, the most obvious, is that I'm excited to have you back because our first conversation was so much fun. And so I'm very excited to get connected with you. FYI, I didn't tell you this in the pre-show, but just so you know, you do have 3 Skype accounts. You have the one that you used when we did our first interview. You have the one that you're currently on, and then I think you may have one from when you were in college that has like a picture of you drinking like this giant martini. And
Yeah, sounds about right.
I think it's you. I
That's me.
sent
I'm sorry. I'm wearing a purple shirt. I know. Yes, I know. Yes.
I sent that person a message as well. So
Oh, perfect. Well, that was me.
yeah.
I wonder what happened.
I have no idea. I have no idea. But the second reason that I'm super excited is because after we did the episode, and I am going to take all the credit for this, by the way, so I hope you don't mind. After you did your podcast premiere with me, your first time ever on a podcast, you then followed that up with like 4 or 5 other podcast appearances.
This
So
is true.
that's super
It's because
exciting.
of you.
It's super exciting. I would like to think it's because of me, but either way, it's very exciting for you that you've had the opportunity to share your story about how you got into triathlon, and some of your other experiences as well through this sport, on a bunch of different shows, which I think is really really cool. So congrats on that one.
Well, thank you.
And so our goal today is we're going to talk about this season because when we spoke the first time for that interview, your season for this year hadn't even really started. So it was January. You were doing a lot of training inside, and you kind of had your focus. You knew what was on your schedule for this season. I believe I was still trying to convince you to come do AC last year, but that did not end up working out. And so, I want to go through your season that you had this year, because you, again, had some amazing, amazing finishes and you did some amazing stuff. And there's also some other things going on that I'm sure you would like to talk about, and that, people are going to definitely have some takeaways from.
Awesome. Thank you.
So let's get into it. Like this season was, I mean, for you, it was just another season of Ginny racing triathlon because, as I was telling you before, from the outsiders looking in and your fan club over here in Delaware,
Hey,
it
Delaware.
just seemed like, it's like, oh, hey, did you see Ginny was on the podium again this weekend? So, I mean, and I know that you are so much more humble about it. But I want to definitely go through a couple races from this season and kind of how things went, and what you think were some of the key things you did between January when we spoke the first time and kind of, your race season that helped you get there. So why don't we talk about, your first big race this season and kind of how everything went there. I know that you were saying before that you actually weren't tapered for any of these races except for your 140.6 in Maryland. So what was going on for your first race, and how was your training leading up to that?
So I guess the training started back up for me in January with my coach and Steve Johnson. And, you're going through all of the normal process of trying to see where your fitness level is and what kinds of gains you can make. And I was really excited going into this year because it was the first year going into a season that I wasn't dealing with a residual injury or something that I was going to have to be aware of as the training continued. And I just felt like I was in a better place. And this was the first year in probably 2 years that I was starting off my season running fairly healthy. So that was huge for me. And, I think I kind of felt like I had it all kind of figured out. And my coach and I had worked together. This was our third year working together. So I, definitely had full trust in everything that he had on there. And, you start up and you're super excited. And going into the first race of the season for me was Eagle Man Half Ironman. And Eagle Man's notoriously hot, notoriously hot race. And I've probably raced it 5 or 6 times. I'd have to go back and look. It's one of those races I just can't stay away from, no matter how much you're like, no, I can't do that race again. And in fact, I'm actually already registered for it for next year too. So It's like you're a glutton for punishment, but it's such a
Mm-hmm.
close race. It's really well put on, and it just makes sense in June to have that kind of as like my opener, just to see where I am. But went into that race, and ironically enough, I think we talked about how I was a swimmer in college and that kind of thing, and how sometimes I just struggle with that in the water. And I did again at Eagleman, and it was probably third or fourth buoy. And I remember talking to one of my friends afterwards, and she was like, "I was wondering what on earth you were doing when I saw you floating on your back." I'm like, I know, I know." And then probably rounding the last turn buoy to come in, she goes, "And then you go flying by me." So she's like, "I have no shame." I was like, "Let me just go on her feet," and we came in, and it's always funny to kind of recap with the people that you see at a lot of the races who and like you see them on the bike, and you're fully supportive of one another and everything, so it's pretty neat. But my power wasn't reading correctly in at Eagleman's on my bike, so I had no clue. I was like, I am really pushing this bike, and I don't know why these are my watt output right now. So I didn't really know where I was going to come in, and had a good bike and went out in the run. And I definitely started out a little fast, but I kept looking down, and I was like, well, if I can hold this the whole time, I'll be good. And for Eagleman standards, it was a little cooler this year than normal, and I was actually able to hold that for the whole time. And it was a good day, a great day for me. So coming in and finishing, I was first in my age group, and I think fourth amateur at that race. So I had good results, and hanging out with the people afterwards that I see every year at that race was fun, and just chatted about how everything went down. And it was a great day.
So I have a question for you, just right off the bat, especially with Eagle Man, that I think will help a lot of people because you're not the only one who experienced something like that in the swim, and I'm sure you probably weren't even the only one who had that experience right there that day in the water. So, what did you go through in your head, and what did you tell yourself, and what was happening for that short period of time that you were floating on your back there in the swim? Because I know for some people that may have been enough for them to actually just wave the lifeguard over and have them, like that's it, their day is done.
Absolutely. You have that, your instinct, your initial instinct and reaction is, where is the closest kayaker? Maybe I should just stop. My breathing was out of control. And, it's something that I've battled, ironically, ever since I started triathlon. And sometimes I get through it and I'm like totally fine. And then other times I have these weird issues. And, so I just stopped kicking, because I was like, stop using your big muscles. Just kind of calm down. Just calm down, get your breathing under control, and like just start. And so I started, I would do like 4 or 5 strokes, and then I'd kind of like just really slowly, and I was just trying to ease into it. And then as soon as I felt comfortable again, that's when I picked it up, and I was like in a good place for that. So that being said, when I went to Ironman Lake Placid to volunteer this year, my coach said, "Listen, I want you to go out, and I want you to do 2 loops on that course as if you were racing it. Like, go out, warm up." And he's like, "Figure it out. Like, figure out what's going on." And so I went out, and it was pouring rain, and I just took it easy. Like, it was like a warm up in a pool. I'm like, this is why we do warm ups in a pool before you do the main set. So I took a completely different viewpoint this year than I have in the past. Whereas, in the past, there have been plenty of races where I could just dive right in and go all out. But for some reason, that stopped working for me. And so I figured it out. I got to like the third or fourth buoy, and just sort of felt like my legs were under me, or I guess not under me because you're swimming, but ready to start kicking. And I was good. And I had a great time during that practice session. So I was like, well, this is what I'm going to apply for the rest of the season moving forward.
And so now moving forward, what you do is you get in and you utilize that warm up area that they have before
I
the race.
No, I actually no, I don't.
Okay.
Um, I don't. I'll like run sprints and stuff to get my heart rate up, but I just ease in. Like, I just
Okay.
get in. I think at Eagleman, like, it's you're coming in off the beach, and you're like jumping, you look like one of those silly frogs trying to run across water. And it's like your heart rate skyrocket, you're breathing and you're like diving in, and your already heart rate is like so high. So the at Eagleman, or Maryland, which is the same course as Eagleman, I literally walked in and like dove calmly and just started my thing, and it was a completely different day on the water for me.
Okay, so you just actually take your time in that style of a start, and then even in like an in-water start, you would do the same. You would not go all out once the gun goes off. You would take your time and start and remain calm and then kind of pick it up as you feel yourself warming up.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Still not using the warm up area though.
No, and you know what? I've done it in the past and it just didn't seem to make any difference.
Okay.
So, especially with some of the races so after Eagleman, every race I did was cold. And like in California at Santa Rosa, this swim actually ended up getting canceled, but it was like 40 degrees there that morning, and getting in the water and then coming out and standing in the cold, to me that's not fun.
Right.
And then Lake Placid was like 33 degrees, literally 33 degrees at the start, and I was not going to get in and swim. And then at Ironman Maryland, it was a little chilly too, like in the 40s. So I was like, it worked at Lake Placid, and so let's see if it works here. And I ran back and forth a couple of times in my wetsuit, did some sprints, and I felt warmed up.
Now, you said that this was like one of the first seasons that you started and you were running healthy. So, was there anything that you switched up in your training, or anything that you had talked out with your coach and said, like, okay, we did this in the past and we did this in the past, and, maybe that wasn't working because of where I kind of ended up? Was there just anything in general about your training plan, or that you talked through with your coach, that may have led to being healthy on the run?
Yeah, I think a lot of my issues previously stemmed from the nerve damage and the pinched nerves that I have in my back. And so for me, doing balance work and core and leg drills and that kind of stuff have been extremely helpful. And they're just simple body things that you can do on your own, with your own body weight. And I think they were really helpful because they helped build up the muscles in my glutes and then my hamstrings. And, I also had a better way of a form of knowledge on how to take care of my back afterwards, and even, the rest of me. So I think that was really helpful. And he was putting it into Training Peaks, like these 30-day challenges that you do. So.
And so what were some of the things that you picked up also, like, as far as you said, taking better care of yourself, like, after the fact?
Well, it's so easy to get finished a workout and hop in the car, come home, and then for me and sometimes my kids will be like, well, they have this planned here and this planned here, or I have to be somewhere. And it's so easy to skip over that body maintenance step, where you're rolling and you're stretching and you're, making sure that everything is going to be able to recover in a better way than just getting into the car and coming home and then going and doing something else.
So taking the time to do the things that you know that you're supposed to do, and that sometimes are even still in your Training Peaks account, but you tend to blow them off.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know that one all too well. I know that one all too well. Especially with the, like, oh, take this 10 minutes before bed to do foam rolling. And you're like, right. I just don't know. I just literally don't have it in me to do foam rolling for 10 minutes. Like, when it's time to go to bed, it's time to go to bed, and I'm tired.
Oh, yeah.
So Santa Rosa, I would have to imagine, I mean, my geography is not good whatsoever, but I would have to imagine that that's a slightly different environment than Eagleman.
Yes.
So what were some of the differences between Santa Rosa and Eagleman, and was there anything that you could do leading up to Santa Rosa that would help you with that?
Well, it's funny because I always just pictured California because I'm that East Coast girl. Like, I always pictured California in general as being warm. Like, it never dawned upon me that Northern California was not
Yes.
always warm.
Yes.
It would go down in the 60s at night, and I was like, wow, I really did not come prepared for this. So that was a bit of a learning curve for me. I didn't, Eagle Man is flat. It is flat, flat, flat.
Mhm.
And Santa Rosa is not. The bike course, has some significant climbs on it. And, you're out in the middle of wine country. And it's like, to me, it was such a trip. I'm like, riding my bike and I'm like looking around at all these different vineyards, and it was really cool. So it was just a different experience for me. And I don't know that there was anything that I did differently to prepare for it because my workouts are pretty consistent. And, to be honest, I do spend a lot of time on my trainer.
Mhm.
So,
And do you have anything? Do you have like a smart trainer? Do you use Zwift, or do you just do like put on Netflix and push your power numbers? Because there's people from all walks of life that get into triathlon, and sometimes I'll post pictures and stuff, and they're like, "Oh, you have the kicker trainer, and oh, you can use Zwift and everything like that, and this and that." I'm like, "Yeah, I do, but like I've only had that for like one season. Like when I first started and I first got into the sport, it was a regular fluid trainer that you get from like Performance Bike that doesn't have anything smart about it, and you just pop your bike on there and you put on a TV and you kind of just go. So I think people tend to get caught up in that. But what do you have
yeah.
any of that stuff or?
Well, going back like 3 years ago, I bought a CompuTrainer because I thought that sounded like a really good idea at the time. And, you could put the CompuTrainer on and it would simulate race courses. And I was like, well, that'll be cool. And then I realized if you have a coach and your workouts are, meant to target certain ranges from this amount of time to this amount of time, and you're doing this and this, it just didn't make much sense for me to have that. So I don't have that any longer. And I was kind of curious about the whole Zwift thing. And so I do not have a smart trainer. I still have what you were talking about, your standard, fluid trainer or whatever. Um, and I bought an A&T stick for Zwift, and I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is so cool. And then I realized it wasn't really helping me the way I thought. Like, I was excited, but then if these segments would come along and you're like supposed to be riding easy, I'd be like, the competitor in me would be like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. So I actually stopped using Zwift, and I am just really a loud music, simple trainer girl. So nothing flashy.
Yeah, well, I mean, but whatever works, and I feel like people think that to get to the level that you are at, or to get to the level that some of these other people are at, that they have to have the same things that those people are training on, but it's not necessarily the case. And actually, I had another guy on, Brandon Kraut, and Brandon just qualified for his pro card, and he doesn't have a smart trainer, he doesn't have a power meter on his bike. The only thing that he has is he uses heart rate on the bike because he has a Garmin heart rate monitor, and then he just runs the pace that he wants to run, like on the run, like that's it. And he qualified for his pro card.
That's awesome.
So it's like you don't have to have this stuff, like it's just,
Yeah.
yes, it's a benefit, yes, it works great, but it's not something that you absolutely have to have, especially if you're just getting into the sport.
No, and it's funny that you mentioned what you did about his run because um, in Santa Rosa, my watch completely died on me during the run. So I was blind completely the entire time. And it's interesting because I never realized how reliant I was on the your current pace for the lap,
Mm-hmm.
feature. And I had nothing. So I was like, okay, well, this is going to go by feel then, and we're going to see what happens. And probably around mile 10, I was like, "Oh, girl, you made a mistake." And I stopped, and I literally was like a buffet at mile 10 aid station. I just stopped and walked through it and took everything, and I was like, "Thank you, yes, thank you." And then I started back up again, and I was like, "Let's see what happens." So it was a pretty neat lesson to come in and then see what my time was and be like, "Oh, all right, that still worked." So it is, one of those things. I think maybe we do pay too much attention to data and we don't trust in ourselves as much. And I felt walking away from Santa Rosa that I learned that about myself a little bit. Now, do I still use the technology I have? Yeah, absolutely. But it's fun to not be so reliant on it and, see what you can do by feel as opposed to, being such a slave to the numbers.
And so tell me about the results at Santa Rosa after you had your buffet at mile 10.
I did.
How did things end up that day? And I know that again, you weren't tapered for that race. And I'm sure, as your coach would say, these are much more, Ginny, these are just long training days.
Well, he would bring me down a little bit. I don't want it to seem like he didn't bring me down in like numbers fully, but I was never fully tapered until Ironman Maryland. So
Right.
yeah.
So how did it go? How was Santa Rosa?
Oh, it was you know we sat around waiting for the announcement on the swim because it was so cold and the water was so warm that it had this like really eerie fog, and you couldn't see in front of you. It was crazy. Like you really could. There was zero visibility on the water. Um, and so they waited, and it's a weird space to be in because, I wanted to swim. I wanted to see if I could put forth what I had taught myself in Lake Placid during that practice. But the longer we sat there, and the colder we got, I was like, I don't even want to swim anymore. And they talked about making it like a 200-meter swim or something, and I was like, that's so silly. I was like, I don't even want to get in the water, and like by the time you finish, like you're just getting warmed up. Like it's crazy. So finally they canceled it, and they did a time trial start, and they sent people off by fours. I was lucky; I had a low number, so I was able to go off in the beginning of the day. So right away, I kind of just wanted to break away from everyone who was around me, and so I definitely took out my bike a little hot, but I just didn't want to be like in clumps of people. And so I just kind of went for it, and then tried to hold a little bit steady once I felt like I was alone in that place. So it was a good day. I got first place in my age group, and I forget what I was overall, but I want to say I was like fourth again or fifth. I can't, maybe I wasn't that high there. I can't remember, but it was top 10
Awesome.
for
Yeah.
sure. It was cool. That race, I had a couple of men come up to me and say, "You can bike," and I don't know why that makes me feel good, but I was like, "Thank you," So it's nice when athletes can like support one another like that. But yeah, it made me feel good. So
Yeah, that is fun. I actually had that experience this year at Escape the Cape too, and we did talk about it on the podcast that I did with John and Laura. But yeah, I came out of transition, and long story short, Laura was behind me, and she was yelling at me and cursing at me because we were coming out of transition, and it's like a little tiny one lane, like basically bike path that gets you out of the ferry terminal. And so she was cursing at me to go faster, and I was like trying to get my shoe on, and so then we get out on the road and we get down a little bit further, and her and I were kind of bouncing back and forth, and then we ended up catching her husband John, and he pulls up next to me and he's like, "Oh, hey, that chick can bike, huh?" And I'm thinking to myself, like in my head, I'm like, "Yeah, she's a real bitch too." Like, and I was like, it was just one of those where I was like, "Not the time, don't say it." Like, just not the time, don't say it. And I was just like, "Yeah, she really can." He's like, "Yeah, that's Laura. That's my wife." And I was like, "Whew, oh, I'm so glad I didn't say that."
That's awesome.
Oh, so but it is fun to like be able to to have that kind of like an interaction with people, and especially after the fact. And we crossed the finish line, not too far apart. So she was standing there and she was like, I'm so sorry for everything I said. I was like, it's totally okay. I get it. I get it. So, after Santa Rosa, you came back from California, and that's when your prep started for Lake Placid, right?
Yes.
And
It was
so,
really long hours.
well,
Yeah.
and I mean, you've done Placid full,
I have done Placid Fall.
so I don't. I mean, no, I guess it's probably the same piece of your brain that tells you to keep signing up for Eagle Man has got to be the same piece of your brain that tells you to sign up for Lake Placid, because Lake Placid, that is another gnarly course. I mean, there are climbs on that bike course that would, like, if people just stood at the bottom of them, they would be like, nope, there's no way.
Oh
There's no
yeah.
way. I mean, I've
And that
never done
descent,
it.
it's amazing. It really is. I think what the big draw with Lake Placid is just the town and how it's just a magical place. And I know that sounds so cheesy, but it really is. Like there's just something about the town being so quaint, and that Mirror Lake is just crystal clear, and it's an awesome experience. And yeah, I think as far as the signing up for the half versus the full, I just wanted to see what one loop of everything on that course was like. I was so excited about it.
Yeah. Well, because
I was
it's
like, yeah. I'm like,
the
oh gosh, I'll only have to do everything once.
yeah, because the bike course is 2 loops, right?
So for
For
the
the
Ironman, it's 2 loops,
yeah.
yes. And so the run is 2 loops also. So it was just one of everything.
Okay, I didn't realize that the run loop was that big. I thought the run course was like a 4 loop like run. Like I thought it
No,
was okay. Okay, so yeah, that's just one loop around everything, which is like definitely, if you're looking at it on paper, much more manageable.
yeah,
Much
yeah,
more. And you only have to go down that extremely scary descent one time.
you do only once.
There's people that come back from that race and they're like, "Oh, dude, I hit like 50 miles an hour on that descent." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're out of your mind. You're out of
Yeah,
your mind."
I think I got up to 47 or 48.
And were you in your aero bars?
I was,
Oh my
but
god, you are a maniac.
just in the beginning, because then you come down and the wind starts kicking, and it was so cold on race day that you go down arrow, but you have to feather your brakes. Like there's no way I mean, you could lose control so easily going down that.
Especially,
So,
and it was kind of, was it wet or just really cold?
oh yeah, it was wet too, and it was windy. So, but it was freezing. I mean, going down the descent, I felt like I had just put my whole entire face in like a bucket of ice. Like my lips felt like if anyone tried to talk to me, I'd be like a blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I got to the bottom. I just had tears like frozen to my cheeks, and I felt like I had been stuck by 1,000 needles. It was crazy. I mean, they had warming tents at the bottom of the descent for people who came down and they were too cold. And I have a good friend who had to utilize the tent. She's like, literally, I got to the bottom and I could not pedal. She's like, I could not pedal. They had her in there with her shoes off and her socks off and holding her shoes up to the warmers and like her feet and her like, yeah. So it was cold. It was cold.
Now, where in the bike course is the descent? Like, is it halfway through? Is it like 3/4 of the
No,
way through? Is it like right in the beginning?
it's right. It's pretty much right in the beginning.
Oh, so this is like
Yeah.
people are like coming out, going down this descent, and there's a good chance that they may not go back out on the bike course.
Yeah. I mean, there's one pretty good climb when you're coming up before you reach it. So like you're warm there, and then all of a sudden you're going down, and you're no longer warm. So
Now, how did you, I guess, like deal with that on that day? And did you know going in that they were calling for it to be that cold?
I knew it was going to be cold, and because of Santa Rosa, I knew wasn't dressed warmly enough in Santa Rosa, and they were actually calling for similar temps in Placid. And then, like a day before, they were like, "Oh no, it's going to be in 30, like 33 degrees," and um, you know, to walk around town that afternoon, was interesting because you could see people just buying anything warm they possibly could. People were saying just buy throwaway sweatshirts. So if you can put it on so that you at least have something. Um, I'm I'm lucky. I think I actually was dressed pretty well. Now my legs were definitely cold to start, but I mean I did warm up. So I had gloves and I had my normal kit with the sleeves, and I had arm warmers, a vest, and a jacket. And then I had toe warmers and my socks, and I had a skull cap, and I was good.
You sound like you're getting ready to go out for like a winter
I know.
ride, not a
It was
triathlon.
I know, it was ridiculous. It really was ridiculous. I was joking around with the girl who placed behind me in my age group, and she's like, "Did you see me sitting on the ground like pulling on tights?" And I was like, "I did." It was like, it's just, I mean, you'll do anything. They had warming tents in transition too, so people could go in and completely change from the swim because, not everybody wants to go out in their wet kit.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so I know that I don't want to like fast forward through your season too much, but I know we do have some questions that people want to ask, and I do want to hear about Maryland and some of the things after Maryland. So
okay,
I want to get to Maryland, and I want to get to that day, and I want to talk about that day. So I'm going to let you take it
okay.
because that was from, like I said, from the outside looking in, that was a huge day. And you did, I mean, just like absolutely amazing things there. So
Thank you.
I want to hear about that.
Okay. So I got to transition and I had a flat on my rear disc, and I didn't have the appropriate tube for my disc, and that's another issue, but we won't address that. um, so I went over to the guys at the bike tech, and they were great. They fixed it right away, and I was all set and good to go. And um, you know, I don't know. I just feel like before races, like this weird calm sort of wash. I check and I recheck, and I'm very systematic and I guess, I have my certain methods and rituals that I do with my nutrition and all that kind of stuff. But walked up to swim start, and they have that same track playing, and you're like, here the song's coming on next, and um, Mike Riley was there, which made it even more cool because he's Mike Riley, and he was doing the announcing at the swim start, and everyone's kind of getting in line, and you know it, some people are talking to each other, some people are just total game face, and the cannon went off, and I did what I practiced in Placid, and I had a solid start, and coming around was really neat because they had it was a 2-loop swim, um, and they had these wires over top of you when you rounded for your second loop. And I guess that's because people were cutting the course in previous years and they wanted to eliminate that from happening. But it was neat to like swim through these like two blown up tubes with these wires hanging over where you knew your chip was timing for your first loop. It was pretty cool. Coming back around the second loop, I ran into probably the back end of the first group, and coming around to the finish, I felt like I had had a good swim, and I looked down at my time when I came out, and I was happy. I saw 101, and I was like, okay, good. I had a good swim. And went in, of course, ran right by my transition bag like I always do. And had to backtrack, and I mean, I even put ribbons and like pink duct tape on the thing. You'd think I'd see it. So grab it, went in, and headed out onto the bike course. I think somebody was like, "You're 8th or 7th or something," and so I went out, and I just hopped out. I felt so good, and it was just, I don't know, I felt really great on the bike. And I remember at one point, I'd passed a few women, but I remember at one point looking down at my computer, and I was like, "Wait a minute!" And I started tapping it. I was like, "Is this thing working?" Because I started doing the math in my head. And I was like, this is a flat course. If I hold this, I was like, can I really do that? And I was like, I don't know. I don't know. And then I think it was probably after almost 1.5 of the loops. Like, so I only had, the end of it to go, probably like 25 miles or so. I looked down and I realized like, this is happening. And I mean, I got emotional. I started tearing up, and I was like almost crying. And I, I remember just saying, I literally said this out loud too, please let this happen for me. Let this happen. And, when I came in and I looked down and I saw like 5:01 for my bike split, I almost had a heart attack. I was like, I cannot believe I just did that. Like, I cannot believe it. And I got off the bike and I felt good. And I came out onto the run, and the second place cyclist came right behind me, and so I was like, wow, all right, I'm in second place. And I knew the first place woman was like way, way out in front. She was smoking fast. But I had seen her on the bike, and I was like, no way. Um, so out on the run, and it was like one of those things. I kept looking down at my watch, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, Jenny, this is too fast. This is too fast. Slow down, slow down. And then I had that argument that I had in Placid, and it seemed to work out okay there. And then you started like, yeah, but this is 26 miles. It's not 13. Well, okay, but so slow it down a little bit. That internal battle. So I thought I slowed it down, and then I'd look at my watch and it would tick off at the same pace. And I'm like, well, I'm going with it. I'm just going to go with it. And that run is crazy. It's like 3.5 loops, and I don't know, 4 loops. You're running past some of the same places like 3 or 4, 5, 6 times. But you hit some pretty barren and hot places out there on that course. It's different from Eagle Man Run. And there's just this one spot on that course where it's just all concrete and like tumbleweeds blowing in the, no, I'm just kidding. But, so, I saw where third place was, and I felt pretty confident I was going to be able to, hold the pace and hold my position. And, when I was passing some friends on the course, I'm like, where am I? Where am I? And they were like, your first age group. So I was like, awesome. Cause I didn't know what age group the woman in first place was, or the woman in third place behind me was, but I never found out which age group she was in. But, coming back around, probably around mile 19, my watch died on me. And this is a different one. I got a new one because my other one completely was dead in Santa Rosa. So I got a new one, but the battery died. I was like, you've got to be kidding me. And then I started feeling like, my ITs and the insides of my legs, and, every phantom ache that you ever had is like, hi. My Achilles, my hamstring. I was like, oh, and I just kept taking ice and like dumping it and shifting it around so that it would hit the spots that were bothering me. And coming up around the last, they put you past the finisher chute there, and you run up these like brick cobblestones, and you do that 3 times, but the third time you come back down and you go straight back into the finisher chute. And so that third time I was headed up those bricks. The first and second time you're like, all right, the third time you're like, oh my gosh. And you look up and you think it's this gigantic hill, and it's just this like gradual little thing. But coming back down and around, I was hurting, and I mentally was just like, come on, you can do this. You can do this. You've got this. And I heard them announce one of my friends' names, Matt Hahn, when I was on my way back up, and it made me smile, and it gave me like a little extra pep. And so I don't know, I came back in the finish, and I as soon as you hit that carpet, like you go somewhere else, you're like, I'm here. And all of a sudden you're like, yay. It's like that slow motion run into the finish. And I don't know, I didn't actually hear anything when I crossed. I was just so like, I've never been so emotional in a race. Like, I had no idea what my time was. I had no idea what my marathon split was, nothing. But it was just like, I felt like finally everything came together for me. And it was like, this did happen. I did this. And I crossed the line, and I put my left foot down, and literally I almost fell. Thankfully, the volunteers were there, and I realized like something was really wrong with the left side of my body, like my foot, my leg. I didn't know what it was, my hip. And so we're in medic, and they're like trying to figure out what's going on. Oh, and leading up to this, I had bronchitis and double ear infection, and so like I'm coughing and like they're like, oh my gosh. But Mark was there, and I said to him, I said, well, what was my run? What was my run time? And then he told me like 3:33 or something, and I was like, I go, what? I literally looked at him. I said, what? And I started crying. I couldn't. 3:33. What? And I said, what was my time? And when he told me it was like 9:47 or something, I I I couldn't. I was like, what? I just. It was such a surreal feeling. I couldn't wrap my head around like, oh my gosh, everything came together for me today. So it was like just a surreal moment, where all the training and all that time and like it paid off. It happened for me that day, and I just still like still thinking back about it. And it's funny because I was just saying to somebody today, because I got the results for my injury. I never really had a chance to kind of celebrate the race because I was really hurting afterwards. And, I never really had that chance to be like, wow, this was, and do all that self-reflection because I was already on to, okay, well, what's next? What doctor am I calling? What am I doing next? And, I have no regrets with how anything turned out and why the injuries I have now it's beyond me. I don't know, but I didn't feel it coming on at all during the race. I wasn't injured going into it, so at least that I knew of. I do know that my tolerance for pain is a little higher than probably the average person. We talked about that because of the plantar fascia tear and the fractured cuboid. But so today, I just learned that I have a stress fracture that is in my hip, my upper femur, but it kind of goes across the base of like the head of the joint. And the doctor I saw was a hip specialist today, and he literally was like, no. Like, if this breaks, you do realize that I'm going to be putting screws into your hip. And I was like, excuse me? Like, what? He's like, what? You should be on crutches. You should be, and I tore my labrum in my hip as well on the same side. It's completely detached. And he's like, I can't believe you're walking. And I was like, why? And really these x-rays were from 2 weeks ago. So I feel like I've healed some since then. I'm definitely not in nearly as much pain. And, I'm back to riding my bike easy and like swimming. And he's like, no. He said, you need to be back on crutches and you need to be taking it easy. And so of course I need a second opinion, but
yeah.
At any rate, so that's where I am with the whole thing. It's just been like going and going and going since it's been a month literally to the day. So, but it was an awesome experience. And, I said to you earlier when we talked, that I knew going into it, it was going to be my last 140.6 for a while. And I think that's what made it so special for me. To just know walking away like that I just probably did the best that I'll ever be able to do at a race.
And so you didn't have any red flags like leading up to this as far as injuries go?
I mean, my right Achilles was bothering me a little bit. And I did have some left hip flexor sensitivity, but I was careful. Like I stopped running. I was like on, doing whatever I needed to do for physical therapy for my Achilles, and in Placid, it didn't bother me at all. And then, I even cut back on running because of my Achilles. I communicate with my coach, and he's like, we're not messing with the Achilles. Like, that's bad. And I said, okay. So, I took some time off from running even. And I felt fine. I did my warm-ups before, and I didn't have anything funky. Mm-mm.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And I just wondered like where it actually kicked in and like where during your race this was. and there's obviously no way to tell, but I mean, I would love to know how long in that marathon you were running on that, and like
I
how, like where, I mean, because your pain tolerance has to be so high, but you said it yourself too, like it's so crazy that you literally, before you crossed the finish line, you were fine. Like, say the finish line was another
yeah.
800 meters, you would have been fine. Like, you could have gone that 800 meters and gotten to the finish line. But as soon as you stepped across the finish line, your body was like, "Hey, Ginny, we're done. Okay, now it's time." Boom.
Oh yeah, it was bizarre. And it's like that whole mind over matter thing that everyone talks about. And I've actually kind of looked into it a little bit. And, there's so many different studies as to like why certain people have a higher tolerance or threshold for pain. And I guess I just don't have that trigger in my head. And sometimes I think that's probably a bad thing, but maybe in this case it was a good thing. I don't know. Like it's definitely bittersweet,
Mm-hmm.
that it happened. Obviously, like nobody wants to be told the news I was just told today, but um, it'll get better. I feel like I've been here before, and I don't know what the end all is going to be for the torn labrum. I'm really hoping that, he said it's completely detached, but I'm really hoping that it, once everything heals with the stress fracture, that's not going to be an issue for me. I know that might sound really naive, but um, the doctor that I worked with originally on this whole thing, he told me that I have a slight tear on the other side too. And he's like, and you're functioning completely fine. He's like, there's a percentage of the population that has torn labrum and they never do anything about it because they don't even they have it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm kind of hoping that's me, but I don't know. Completely detached sounds sounds not good.
Yeah. Yeah. No.
So
Well, and so the same girl that was yelling at me on the bike as we were coming out of transition, Laura, she also had the same thing. And hers was an overuse injury, and she was running. She was using like her running as therapy, but she was running so much that that same exact thing happened,
yeah.
right? So and she's back to racing now, and she's fine. Like, she does, sprints and Olympics, and she does sprints and Olympics because that's like her thing, that's what
Hmm.
she likes. But she's completely back, and feels like she's in the best shape that she's ever been in, like right now, and that's post the tear. So I am by no means a medical doctor. I don't play one on TV, but just a little glimmer of hope for you. I do know someone in the sport who, has gone through the same thing. So I'll keep my fingers crossed.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing that story with me. It's kind of been nice in the sense that I'll post some stuff to my stories, and I'll have people reach out to me and say that, oh, I had this, I had that. And it's just nice to get everyone else's experiences and stories with these injuries too, because it does help me put a timeline together, and also just put more of a reality check on it as well. So um, I said to one of my friends tonight, it's just hard, you know. Um, I've not been doing very much. I have maybe been to the pool 4 times. I've ridden my bike super easy like 3 times. Um, first time was for 10 minutes, and I'm not used to this kind of lifestyle.
Yeah. Oh, I hear you. I mean, I haven't done anything for probably about the same amount of time. It's probably been like 3 weeks to a month. Um, and I didn't tear my labrum. So my injury, quote unquote, isn't to the same level, but I I'm going insane. Like, my body is telling me that I'm tired, and I know that I'm not, but it's like
Yes, what's that about?
my body is just so far out of whack not training,
Yeah.
that yeah, it's not good. And so, and I have to take it easy, and like, even coming off of antibiotics, like, I have to be careful because apparently I'm on some kind of antibiotic that has a link to like Achilles tendon rupture, and I'm like,
Oh
oh,
my
this is,
gosh.
yeah. So it's like one simple thing that I messaged my coach about, and I was like, hey, I noticed this. Should I take a day off? That turned into like 3 weeks off.
Yeah.
So long story short, use your chamois cream when you're riding.
Oh no.
So, yeah, fun times.
Oh yeah.
Um, so I do have some questions, some fan questions.
Oh, stop.
Um, I don't know if you got any questions, but you can definitely check your Instagram if you want to. I don't know if people sent questions to you as well as sending them to me, but I do want to hit a couple, and I guess we'll get the big one out of the way because I think this one's going to require a little bit more explanation than some of the other ones. So after Maryland, I was obviously checking pictures and Instagram and everything, especially after I saw the results on the tracker. And I noticed that, you had a picture with your like trophy that Ironman gives out. And normally when someone finishes that high, they also get something else because they agree to go to another really big race. But I noticed that you didn't have that other chip.
No.
And so it's funny because I did get this question, and so I'm sure it's a question that a lot of people want to know. Are you going back to Kona?
I am not going back to Kona. I'm not. It was a tough decision, but it was one that I had actually decided upon. No matter what happened at this race, that Ironman Maryland was going to be my last 140.6 for several years, and the reason being that I have a 13-year-old son and a 10-year-old daughter, and I just feel like right now is their time, and I know that I'm going to blink and they're going to be out of this house and in college and starting their own lives. And I don't want to miss out on, them. And I feel like, they've been supportive of me and my passion. And it's time for me to be able to be supportive of them and their passions. And my daughter is quite the musician. She plays 3 instruments, and she's 10, and she does student council, and she's in plays, and she's super active and social. And my son, he's into cross country and running, and so it's something that we'll be able to do together. And I just felt like now was the perfect time, just developmentally for both of them, and also academically with where my son is. He just needs, a little extra. So I want to make sure that I'm giving it to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I guess, like you said, that's why Maryland was such an emotional finish for you, not only because it was, you know, the absolute perfect day for you. And like you said, everything came together for you to have such an amazing day. But that was your last time crossing the finish line and hearing someone say, Ginny Cataldi, you are an Ironman for a little while.
Yeah.
So, all right, I do have some just quick, little short, fun questions. So, first one is favorite music, either band or genre or Pandora station, while you're on the trainer.
It's Imagine Dragons.
Okay. All right.
Yes, but not on the trainer. They're my favorite bands to listen to, but probably not on the trainer. I
No.
listen to Fit Radio. I don't know if you've ever even heard of it.
No, I haven't.
So it's similar to Pandora, except for it's all workout based, and you can go on and you can pick out the speed that you want to hear. You can pick out the genre, and all that kind of stuff. And so I've been listening to Fit Radio, and you can favorite your favorite playlists, and so that's what I listen to.
So
it's a little bit of hip hoppy dance stuff, and that kind of thing.
Okay,
yeah.
so it's really similar to Pandora, but just all more centered for workouts.
Yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So is Ginny your real name, or is Ginny a nickname for something?
Ginny is a nickname for Virginia.
Okay.
Yes, but since I'm not 90 years old yet, we're gonna refrain from being called that for a while.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
I'm sure that that brought on a little trouble when you were younger. So
absolutely,
we won't go back there. We won't go back there. We'll just
don't
leave it
make
at
me relive it. Don't.
that. if either in a full iron or a half iron, I would have to say that it probably doesn't happen in anything shorter than that. But you are on the run and you're hitting the wall. What's your favorite thing to grab? Like when you are going through the buffet, what is the number one thing that you're looking for? Like, oh my God, I hope they have
Coke,
this.
Coca-Cola.
And follow up question to that: if you go Coke, do you go back to anything else, or do you just stick with Coke for the rest of the time?
No, I just stick with. Actually, I mean, in all honesty, once I go to Coke, I just take everything. So like at that buffet at mile 10,
Uh huh.
then for the rest of the aid stations, I would just, except for Red Bull. Ugh, no.
I have never done a race where they have had Red Bull, and I've been told that they were going to have it. And so when I hit the wall, normally what happens is I try and save the Coke for as far off as I possibly can.
Absolutely.
Like I don't want to go to it if I don't have to.
No.
But if I have to go to it, then I'm not going for anything else. It's like Coke and water, Coke and water. That's it until the end. But I've always been like at that last like 5K or that last like 2 miles, I'm like, oh, where's the Red Bull? Where's the Red Bull? And they've
Are
never
you
had it.
serious?
Yeah, they've never
Oh
had
my
it.
gosh. Well, then if I come to AC next year, we're going to make sure you get some Red Bull.
Oh, I like, and I've done AC, and Red Bull's like a sponsor of Delmo, and they work together.
Right.
So like I'm fully expecting it to be there, and I haven't seen it yet. So I don't know. Maybe I'll get my Red Bull one day. Maybe I won't.
Oh, I hope you do.
So after your races, right? Like after any race, um, do you have any lows after that race? And if so, how do you get motivated again? Like once your, relaxation period is over and it's time to start training, if you did go through a low, how do you get motivated to kind of get back in the swing?
Hmm. I think the post-race blues are like perfectly normal for anyone to experience because again, you're training, and then all of a sudden you're being brought down and like you have your day and then you're like, oh. And I think it's especially hard if you don't have anything else to look forward to. So for me, it's okay. Well, that one's done and it's over, and you put in your time. This was the result, and now it's time to focus on the next. What's next? And so I think having something, even if it's not a race, but having something that you can focus on, um, is what I need. Like actually, after this season, I was going to do my first standalone marathon. Well, second standalone marathon. I was registered for Philly Marathon, and it's so sad. My bib and my T-shirt came in the mail the other day, and I was like, really, really. But so I was looking forward to kind of putting um, a focus on just running a little bit for the off season. It's like my favorite time of the year, and I'm not even getting out there and enjoying it. So even if it's like I'm going to go on my road bike and I'm going to go for like a long ride today, just having something to focus on that's different.
100%. I cannot agree more. I actually went and like rebuilt my road bike that I got from when I first started the sport because the first season that I had my tri bike, I was like, this is amazing. I love you. Like, it was in the house with me. Like, all those Instagram pictures of like the bike next to your bed. Like, that was totally me. And like, that was great for like that first year. But then, like, then we got through the honeymoon and that phase was over, and I was like spending 3 hours on the same bike for like multiple weekends in a row, and then it got to the point where I was like, I don't even want to look at you anymore. And
Even like
so then so I flipped it and I was like, oh, wait, I have this road bike and this is cool. Like I can get on this and I can ride and I can go get coffee and I could go do this. And like,
yeah,
I have friends that like I can ride with, and it doesn't have a power meter and it doesn't have a speed sensor and it doesn't have a cadence.
no,
Like it literally doesn't
freedom.
have any of the fancy
Yep.
things on it. And so I think that's been huge. And so now I know when I'm getting in that weird place, like just get on the road bike and go
Yeah.
for a ride. So, and I mean, there's so many other things that people can do, but I agree, having something like that to switch it up, it can definitely be a lifesaver. And then obviously, like you said, if you have another goal that you're working towards, and you have like, maybe another race or maybe another distance, or maybe it's not even like another triathlon, but it's
No,
just like
something.
something else that you can do, I think, just to kind of keep that motivation
Like
going.
even a plank challenge or something like that. I think you and I should do a plank challenge actually.
Okay, that's fine. I'll agree to it. But I have to, like, you have to let me get back into training first.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess I should be able to put support on my leg first, right? All
Right.
right.
So,
So, okay, we're on holding, but that's first. That's a spring goal.
okay,
All right.
that's a deal. And then
We can bring anyone else in who wants in.
we're going. I'll say that we're going to. I need to be careful how I word this, because we'll both be at Atlantic City.
Yes.
We're not going to. We're not going to be racing it together. We'll just happen to be on the same course at the same day. I won't even say at the same time, because
Stop it.
you're gonna go off. You'll probably go off before me, and I might see you coming out of the swim before I get in.
Oh my gosh.
And then and then we'll see what happens from there. But we will be sharing the course in AC together. But I think the other thing, and I don't know why I'm going like so hard on this, but everyone who I know that I've been talking to who's like, oh, I don't know what I should do next year, blah 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 blah. I'm pushing everyone I know to put their name in for the Chicago Marathon. So if you do want to do your second open marathon, like just standalone marathon, I think it's actually tomorrow. I think it's October 30th, but I'll double check the date and I'll send you a message for sure. You should definitely put your name in for the Chicago Marathon, just for fun, to see if you get in through the lottery.
Just for fun. Okay.
Because it's like this time of year. So it would be after AC. You would be coming down from your triathlon season. It's like pretty much right around the same time as Philly. It might be a little bit earlier, because I think it's usually like Chicago. It usually goes like Chicago, Marine Corps, Philly, New York, or something like that, I want to say.
So this is my only problem with that, and why I picked Philly was because
well, it's close.
It's close. The whole teacher thing and my days off, and I'm going to France, so I'm going to be using all my days.
Well, France is in the summer.
No, it's not. It's the half Ironman Worlds are in September.
What? Did they change that?
No, they changed it. Well, they changed it years ago, because it used to be in August.
Yeah.
When it was in Vegas, but no, ever since they moved it, yeah.
No way, Jose. When it was in Chattanooga, it was in the summertime.
It was not.
All right. I mean, I didn't go, and you did, so you're.
I think it was
right.
like September 9th or something. I'm like, it was not.
It probably is, because I think the year that you did it, I was like, wow, that's really close to Kona to do a 70.3.
Yeah.
So all right. You're right.
Wait, say it again.
You're right. Well, either way, Chicago's on a Sunday, and you could go out Friday afternoon, and it's not even that far. And it's not like you're doing a full Ironman, so you're still going to be able to walk at work the next day.
Yeah, I mean, I could even walk the marathon, so.
And probably still beat me. So.
Stop it. You're so ridiculous.
All right.
Red Bull has wings.
All right. Well, I've stolen enough of your time. I'm sorry we didn't stay under an hour. But I do want to thank you for coming back again. And I want to thank you for both sharing your story of Maryland, because I'm sure that your story of the race itself was obviously amazing, and that's probably an easy one to share. But I think that the after effects and some of the things that you're going through right now are not as easy to talk about. So I want to thank you for being open and sharing those things. And I want to thank you again for just coming on, because, I'm stealing an hour's worth of your time. And
not stealing. It's been really nice talking to you again.
So, all right. Well, it's decided. We know what's happening for next season. We have a plan. And I think the last time you were on, you did agree to come do the Thanksgiving Day 5K, but I won't hold you to that for this year. Maybe we'll do that for next year.
Yes, that will have to be a next year thing, because I don't see myself being able to run in like a week or 2 weeks.
No,
So,
no, probably not. So,
but
but
yeah.
we'll figure something else out for sure.
Okay,
All
sounds like a
right,
good plan. Yes,
cool.
thank you.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, my friends. First of all, I just want to say, if you are coming over from Ginny's Instagram, I want to say thank you for coming over and checking out the podcast. I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and please feel free to check out some of the other episodes that are here. I've had some really, really awesome stories of people who are doing it for themselves, whether it be in triathlon or other avenues in their lives. So I would love to have you stick around and hang out and kind of share some more time with us. And the easiest way to do that is to check out a couple of the episodes. If you are a regular listener, I just want to take a minute to say thank you. Without your support, this show obviously would not be happening. So I definitely want to say thank you guys so much for the regular listeners who are tuning in and week out, sending me messages, giving me guests who they would love to hear on the show, just sending positive stuff my way. I really appreciate that. And if I don't get a chance to get back to you right away, just know that I do see your messages, and I really, really appreciate that. If you would like to support the show, the first and biggest thing that you could do for me would be to just leave a review on iTunes. I would really, really appreciate that, and it would mean a lot to me if you could take a couple minutes and just leave a review on the Apple Podcast app or whatever app it is that you use to listen to podcasts. As for next week, I am super excited to bring you an interview with someone who I have been following for quite some time. If you want, you can check him out before the interview drops. His name on Instagram is Wes No Limits Hammer Harder. And this, my friends, is going to be another amazing episode. So until next week, again, thank you so much, and I will see you then.